again, everybody. You're very welcome to join us here on The Breakfast Show on Sky News. Political divides in the UK run deep at the moment. And following a summer of sleaze allegations and a leadership battle, never more so than with the party of government. Policies too are dividing. The Chancellor's mini-budget containing the biggest tax cuts since the 70s, putting some clear blue water between the Conservatives and Labour. For 2 centuries, America has walked the line between the broadest of divides, made starker after the Trump years and with midterm election weeks away. So, how does political landscape across the Atlantic compare to what's happening closer to home? In Nashville, Tennessee, is US political commentator and journalist Scotty Nell Hughes, and in South London is lawyer and political and rights activist Dr. Shola. I always get this wrong, Shola. Well, I usually just call you Dr. Shola, don't I? Please pronounce it for me again.
No, I usually make you say my full name, Kay, right?
No, I'm going to go with it. Moshog Bamumu.
Well done, my darling.
It's the least I can do, get your name right. Good morning to you both, Scotty. Much easier to say, but it's good of you to stay up and talk to us this morning, Scotty. Thanks very much indeed. I just want to ask about our Prime Minister to start with and what the view is of her across the pond. What do people think of Liz Truss, Scotty?
Well, at this point, they're kind of just sitting back and waiting. Obviously, different parties, different names. Is she really a conservative, despite that's what's saying is who put her into power? And obviously, anytime, especially if you're talking about Republicans, cutting taxes should be a good thing. But the reaction by the economy this morning with the sterling pound dropping absolutely to abysmal bottom levels shows maybe that might have not been the smartest move at this current time. So at this point, Liz Truss, obviously, your former prime minister, was getting to be not as popular. Some saw him as a best friend of Donald Trump. Some saw him as an anti-Donald Trump, as they often butted heads while Trump was in power. A lot of people in America are looking to see how Liz Truss is, and despite her coming from the more conservative, supposedly, wing of the country, or the party of the country, they don't necessarily see her as being someone who represents conservative values, or at least how we define them here on this side of the pond.
Indeed. And Dr. Shola, how can we make any comparisons between the two main parties as we go into party season here? Can we make any comparisons between the two main parties here and the two main parties over in the US?
I think absolutely yes, without a doubt. Nobody can say that the Conservative Party is not the British equivalent of the US Republican Party. They run on the same divisive politics. They use the divisive politics to distract the politically illiterate from the enormous mistakes they continue to make. They run on anti-woke ideology. They run on far-right ideology. They become, I'm talking about the US Republican Party and the UK Conservative Party have become the established far-right political party in both countries. And the truth about the matter is that Liz Truss is not different from Boris Johnson. Okay? And anybody thinking that they're different is absolutely wrong. She's literally running on the same policies. It's more of the same. I call her Liz Truss not. And we can see that with the impact of her mini budget, that it is similar again to what the Republicans have done when they were in power under Trump, which is to place priority on the rich and make the working class bear the brunt of it all. And this is what we're talking about. We have to bear in mind that there is no difference here. There's now a new playbook, and that playbook is the playbook of the anti-woke, of far-right ideology, of teasing and using all kinds of delusions and illusions to stop people scrutinizing and paying attention to what they're doing. They come up with all of this fake outrage over the smallest things so that people are not scrutinizing their policies on the economy. People are not scrutinizing the policies they're making that are actually affecting the lives of the marginalized. So as far as I'm concerned, the Republican and the Conservatives are running on the same playbook.
I know that you'll want to come back on that, Scotty, but I also wanted to ask you whether you have an equivalent of annual party conferences like we do in the UK. How are the parties scrutinised? You've got the midterms coming up, but apart from that?
Well, once again, I have to remind Shola that she can say all these things about the Conservative Party, but guess what? They're the ones in power. They're the ones being put in power by the people. And there is a big difference, at least in our Republican Party, so I imagine it's the same thing that exists within the Tories, the Conservatives. There's a big difference between Ron DeSantis and a Mitt Romney. And from everything that I'm studying, Liz Truss is much more like a Mitt Romney, and that is something that is not welcome within the Republican Party. There is still a major divide within our party, and a lot of times people in Party are having to go and vote the least of the two, which are worse. And it all comes down to these elections. And we're seeing this, excuse me, it's my turn, Shola. What we're seeing, not only in America, but across the world right now, is people, I think this is actually what post-coronavirus, post-pandemic did, is it actually showed the hypocrisy. And unlike Shola, I'm going to say the hypocrisy of all politicians in power, the majority of them in power. And those people are being held accountable in their elections, just like what we saw in Italy yesterday with the election of Giorgia Meloni. You're seeing, obviously, the red wave that's going to come in the U.S. Even Democrats have said they don't even want to campaign with this president. That is what you're seeing right now. Is I think it's actually an accountability of the hypocrisy that the pandemic showed, that those in power feel like that the rules are for thee, but not for me. And that's what I think you're actually seeing more of a terms coming to in not only the U.S., the U.K., but globally right now.
I can't agree with that, Scotty. I do agree with the point that there's definitely that trend of representing the few as opposed to the many, but I do not see the accountability you're talking about. For the last 12 years in the United Kingdom, we've had a Conservative Party that has literally thrown the economy of this country underground. What we've had, 12 years of a Conservative Party that gave us Brexit. We know what Brexit is doing to our country. That gave us Boris Johnson, who so far has been the most incompetent prime minister to date, that totally mismanaged the pandemic. I mean, the list just goes on. It's not yet time. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the time for accountability and transparency is now. But Liz Truss was not voted in democratically by the country. She was voted in by the smallest proportion you can possibly think of that represent the Conservative Party, and that's not the country. So we have to pay attention to this. She is not different from Boris Johnson.
Yeah, but we can't really say that, Shola, can we? Because, we don't vote for a prime minister, do we? We vote for a party.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is it is more of the same. Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng, a lot of the people in her cabinet were part of the previous government. So if we want to talk about accountability and transparency, we've not gotten that yet. Is it time for it? There was corruption in this, during the whole pandemic. There was questionable behaviors, and that's why I'm saying that the Labour Party, similar to the U.S. Democratic Party, cannot rely on the own goals being played by the Conservative Party. They have to capitalize on the questionable behavior, conduct of the people in power.
Okay.
I did not put them in power. Majority of people in this country did not put them in power. Many people will tell you Brexit has been proven thus far.
But that's the way our political system works, though, Shola, isn't it? Let me just bring in Scotty, if I may. 7 weeks away from the midterms, what's going to happen?
I think everybody's undeniably saying that there is going to be a red wave, that you are going to see at least the Senate, more than likely the House as well, turning over, creating quite a thorn in President Biden's side of his agenda. And that's all because basically of what is happening not only in the U.S., but the same thing. I mean, you're looking at right now, both the UK and the U.S. has the highest crime rate in their streets in 20 to 40 years. That's incredible. We have inflation. There is nothing working about the agenda that's going on in the U.S., and that's right there going to be the motivation when people go in the polls and they actually take their vote. It's not going to be about the person or the party. It's going to be what they're seeing reflecting in their pocketbook, in their streets, in their schools, and they're going to say, we need something different. We need a change. More now convicted than ever before. And I think as much as Shola hates the party in power right now, guess what? They are continuously being put in power. That's how it works, Shola. And so the majority of the power, eventually it trickles down, that they keep putting them in power. So if your party is so good, why can't they win? Why can't they assume power? It's because the people don't want it.
This is what I'm talking about, Scotty. When I'm pointing out that both in the US and the UK, we have people in power that deliberately providing misinformation, using that to cause and sell divisive rhetoric to distract people from the wrongs that they are doing. It's not about, it's not just about people placing these people in power. It's also about the accountability, the lack of media coverage, deep media coverage on what is going on. And I'm saying to you that perhaps when it comes to the next general election here in the UK, on the midterms, we will see exactly where people want to lie, because they should have had enough by now. I'm trying to be hopeful.
But they have. They're still voting. They're still voting against the
Brexit.
They're still voting against
a mismanagement of the pandemic and all of that. That maybe people, the politically illiterate, especially, will Liberal Democrats. I'm saying they have a choice to make, and that choice is not the Conservative Party.
Okay, we have run out of time, ladies. Fascinating to speak to both of you. It'd be good to talk to you again next week when the government have their party conference. But for now, Scotty Nell Hughes and Dr. Shola Moshogbemimu, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme this morning. Thank you. I'll actually be up at Labour Party conference tomorrow. We'll be hearing from the leader, Keir Starmer, then, of course, and then up to Birmingham for Conservative Party conference the following week.